She thought this time would be like always. The same hotel, the same room, the same lies. She was so sure of herself. Like I was some fool who'd never catch on. But what Amanda didn't know was that this time, I'd be waiting for her. And I wasn't just waiting to confront her. No, this time I had something planned. Something that would turn her whole world upside down. And here's the kicker. I wasn't the only surprise waiting for her. What she walked into was bigger than just me. She thought she was running the show, but I had rewritten the script. It was time for her to learn exactly who she was dealing with. Here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just sting. It opens your eyes. You start seeing things you ignored for too long. Those late-night work calls. The sudden wardrobe upgrades. The way she barely looked at me anymore. I saw it all now, and I wasn't going to sit around like some guy in a bad soap opera. The first crack in the facade came one quiet evening when Amanda had left her phone on the kitchen counter. Normally, she was attached to it like it was some kind of lifeline. But this time, she'd left it there while she was upstairs showering. I wasn't the kind of guy to snoop. I didn't need to be, but something about that moment felt different. I stared at the screen, the little light still glowing from her last notification. It was a text from someone named Dylan. Now, let me be clear. I'm not the jealous, paranoid type. I respect privacy, I don't jump to conclusions, and I sure as hell don't need to chase anyone down for reassurance. But something about this didn't sit right. I didn't hesitate. I unlocked her phone. Turns out her passcode was still the anniversary date she forgot last year. And there it was. Not just one text. A thread. Dylan. This time I'm booking a suite. You deserve better than this. Amanda. Lucas thinks I'm at work. No problem at all. I stared at those words for what felt like hours. No problem at all. Like I was some kind of clueless idiot. I scrolled further, my hand tightening around the phone. There were pictures too. Her at a cafe I didn't recognize. Her in a dress I'd never seen her wear. Him. A smarmy-looking guy with slicked-back hair and the kind of face you just know can't be trusted. For a split second, I felt this raw, white-hot rage bubbling up inside me. I wanted to march upstairs, confront her right then and there, and demand an explanation. But then I stopped. I breathed. No, that wasn't the move. Confronting her now would only make her defensive, give her a chance to cover her tracks. If I was going to do this, I needed to be smart about it. So, I put the phone back exactly where I found it. When she came downstairs, wrapped in a towel, she gave me that same half-hearted smile she always did now. The one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Everything okay?" she asked, drying her hair. "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone steady. "Just figuring out what to order for dinner." She nodded, completely unaware that I knew her little secret. That night, as we lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling while she scrolled on her phone, probably texting Dylan about their next meeting. Every part of me wanted to grab the phone out of her hands, but I stayed patient. This wasn't just about catching her in the act. It was about making sure she couldn't wriggle out of it when the time came. Over the next few days, I pieced it all together. Her routine, her excuses, her lies. She wasn't even subtle about it. "I'll be working late tonight," she'd say, her tone just a little too rehearsed. "I've got a meeting out of town," she claimed once, leaving early in the morning wearing perfume I hadn't smelled on her in years. And then there was Dylan. Oh, Dylan was everywhere. Texts at all hours. "Thinking of you. Can't wait to see you again." He was laying it on thick. I even found one where he called her his queen. His queen. The arrogance of this guy. The more I saw, the clearer it became. This wasn't just some passing fling. Amanda had gotten comfortable, complacent. She thought she had me so wrapped around her finger that she could pull this off right under my nose. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. I decided to play the long game. It wasn't enough to just catch her. I needed her to feel the weight of what she was doing. I needed her to understand exactly what she'd thrown away. And the first blow? It wouldn't even come from me. The next piece of the puzzle came to me by sheer accident. Or maybe it was fate. Who knows? I wasn't exactly planning on finding out that Dylan, the guy who was so busy stealing my wife, was also juggling another woman. But once I did, everything started falling into place. It happened while I was digging deeper into Dylan's life. Social media, for all its downsides, can be an incredible tool if you know how to use it. Dylan wasn't subtle. He had a public profile with just enough breadcrumbs for me to follow. And that's when I saw her. Her name was Clara. Her smiling face was plastered all over his photos. Beach vacations, fancy dinners, captions like, "Lucky to have this beauty by my side." At first, I thought maybe she was just some random ex. But then I checked the dates. They overlapped. Dylan was seeing Clara and Amanda at the same time. Now, I could have just filed that little nugget of information away for later. But no. This was an opportunity too good to pass up. If Clara was anything like me, she had no idea what was going on. And if she found out, well, let's just say two betrayed people are a lot harder to ignore than one. It took me a couple of days, but I found Clara's contact info. She was tagged in enough posts that I could piece it together. I debated for a moment about how to approach her, but then I realized honesty was the best weapon here. I called her on a Tuesday afternoon. She picked up on the third ring. "Hello." Her voice was light, pleasant. She didn't sound like someone who knew she was being played.
Clara.
"You don't know me, but we need to talk. It's about Dylan." There was a pause. "Who is this?" "My name's Lucas. I know this is out of the blue, but I've got a feeling Dylan hasn't been completely honest with you." She hesitated, probably wondering if I was some kind of prank caller. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that while he's busy taking you to fancy dinners, he's also sneaking around with my wife, Amanda." The line went silent for a moment. Then, "What did you just say?" Her voice had a sharp edge to it now. "I know this is a lot to take in," I said, keeping my tone calm. "But I have proof. Texts, photos. If you're willing to meet, I can show you everything." We met at a small cafe a couple of miles from my house. Clara showed up in a trench coat, sunglasses, and an expression that could have cut glass. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "All right," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Show me." I handed her my phone and let her scroll through the screenshots I'd saved. Her face went pale, her jaw tightening with every swipe. "That bastard," she muttered under her breath. Then she looked up at me, her eyes blazing. "How long has this been going on?" "Long enough," I said. "From what I've found, at least a few months. Maybe more." Clara leaned back in her chair, running a hand through her hair. "I can't believe I fell for his crap. He said I was the only one, that he wanted to build a future with me." I nodded. "He told Amanda the same thing. You deserve better. I'll treat you like a queen." All the usual garbage. Her jaw clenched. "What do you want from me?" "Simple," I said. "I want to expose them. Both of them. Amanda thinks she's pulling the wool over my eyes, and Dylan clearly thinks he's untouchable. But if we work together, we can take them down." Clara's lips curved into a tight, dangerous smile. "I like the way you think, Lucas. Let's do it." When two betrayed people join forces, things get much more interesting. The next move was Clara's. She insisted on being the one to contact Amanda, and honestly, I wasn't going to argue. She had a fire in her that told me she wasn't just out to expose Dylan. She wanted to make them both squirm. I was in the living room when it happened. Amanda was in the kitchen, sipping her morning coffee like she didn't have a care in the world. Her phone buzzed, and she picked it up without hesitation. "Hello?" she said, her tone casual. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop at first, but as soon as I heard her voice change, sharp, almost defensive, I started paying attention. "Who is this?" Amanda asked, and I could hear the unease creeping in. She turned her back to me, leaning against the counter like she was trying to shield herself. Then she went quiet, listening. Whatever Clara was saying on the other end had her rattled. I don't know what you're talking about," Amanda stammered. Her voice was quieter now, but I caught enough. "Who told you that?" She paused again, her free hand gripping the edge of the counter like she needed to steady herself. "No, this must be some kind of mistake. I need to go. I could tell she was about to hang up, but Clara must have said something that stopped her in her tracks. Amanda froze. What do you mean, you know? Who are you? Another pause. Then Amanda's voice dropped to a whisper. All right, I just need to think. I can't take any risks right now. She hung up and stood there for a moment, staring down at her phone like it had just turned into a ticking time bomb. She didn't move, didn't speak. I could practically see the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out what just happened and who Clara might be. And there I was, sitting on the couch, pretending to scroll through emails while she unraveled in front of me. Amanda, I said casually, glancing up from my phone. Everything all right? She jumped like I'd caught her red-handed. Yeah, she said quickly. Just a work thing. Work thing. I raised an eyebrow. On a Sunday morning? She gave me a weak smile. You know how it is. Clients don't take weekends off. Right? I said, letting the moment hang. Anything you need help with?
No.
I've got it, she said, brushing me off. I just need to make a quick call. I'll be upstairs. She practically bolted out of the room, phone clutched in her hand like it held the answers to all her problems. I stayed where I was, a small smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. She thought she'd gotten away with it. She thought this was just some minor inconvenience, something she could smooth over with a few lies and some clever maneuvering. But her fear? That was just the beginning. By now, I had the whole routine mapped out. Amanda and Dylan always met at the same hotel. Same time, same room. They thought they were being discreet, but predictability is the enemy of secrecy. And Amanda? She'd practically handed me her playbook. I didn't just want to catch them. I wanted to make this unforgettable. This wasn't about rage or revenge anymore. It was about precision, about delivering a message so clear, so undeniable, that neither of them could pretend they hadn't deserved it. So I started making arrangements. I called the hotel a few days before their next scheduled rendezvous. It was easy enough to figure out the date. They weren't exactly careful. Amanda had dropped a couple of late work night hints, and Clara confirmed Dylan's plans. Hi, I said, my tone polite but firm. I'd like to reserve room 407 for this Friday evening. The manager on the other end paused. Actually, that room is already booked. I know, I said smoothly, but I believe you'll want to hear me out. It didn't take much convincing. A few carefully chosen words about wanting to surprise my wife with a romantic gesture in the room she'd chosen, plus a little extra money under the table, and the manager was all in. People love a good story, especially when it's attached to a generous tip. The day finally came. Amanda left that morning with her usual excuses. A quick kiss on the cheek and a promise that she'd be working late. I watched her drive off, my expression neutral. This was it, the day I'd been building toward. I arrived at the hotel about an hour before she was supposed to meet Dylan. The staff gave me the key to room 407 without a hitch. As I walked down the hallway, I could feel the weight of what I was about to do, but I didn't falter. Once inside, I got to work. First, I spritzed her favorite perfume, a scent I hadn't smelled on her in months. The room instantly filled with that familiar floral aroma, and for a moment, I felt a pang of nostalgia. But I pushed it aside. This wasn't about the past. It was about the truth. Next, I placed a shattered photo of our wedding on the nightstand. The glass was cracked, the frame slightly bent, but the picture itself was still visible. Amanda smiling in her dress, me standing beside her, looking at her like she was my whole world. I set the final touch on the bed. A single folded piece of paper. On it, I'd written just 4 words in bold, black ink. You did this yourself. Satisfied, I stepped back and surveyed the room. It was subtle, yet unmistakable. Everything I'd placed had a purpose. This wasn't just a trap. It was a show Amanda had unwittingly helped create herself. Before I left, I set up a hidden camera in the corner of the room. I needed more than just their reactions. I needed undeniable proof of what was about to go down. As I closed the door behind me and walked out of the hotel, I felt a strange sense of calm. Everything was in motion now. All I had to do was wait. Hint. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a performance. And they had front row seats. Amanda was on edge. I could see it in the way she moved around the house, her usual calm replaced by jittery nervousness. She thought she was being careful, but the little signs were everywhere. She'd glance at her phone, her lips pressed into a tight line, and her fake smiles had gotten even worse. A couple of days after the mysterious call from Clara, Amanda announced she needed to work late again. She tried to make it sound casual, but I could hear the tension in her voice. Big project? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Yeah, she said, not meeting my eyes. Just a lot to catch up on. I nodded, pretending not to notice the way her hand gripped her phone like it might save her life. Don't overdo it, I said as she kissed me on the cheek and hurried out the door. The moment her car disappeared down the street, I pulled up the GPS tracker I'd installed on her phone weeks ago. Sure enough, she was headed straight for Dylan. I stayed back and let her get ahead, keeping my movements deliberate and calm. I wasn't in a rush. I already knew where she was going. She pulled into the hotel parking lot just after 6, the setting sun casting long shadows across the asphalt. I parked a few rows back, far enough that she wouldn't notice me. She stepped out of her car, looking around nervously before making her way to the entrance. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she clutched her purse tightly against her side. She wasn't just meeting Dylan. She was walking into a situation she didn't fully understand. I waited, watching as she disappeared through the glass doors. She thought she was in control, thought this meeting was her way of keeping everything from falling apart. What she didn't realize was that this time, she wasn't the one pulling the strings. I stayed in the car for a moment, letting the weight of the situation settle over me. It wasn't anger or sadness I felt anymore. It was focus, pure and simple. Amanda had chosen her path, and now she was walking straight into the trap I'd laid for her. When I finally stepped out of the car and started toward the hotel, I knew exactly how this would play out. Amanda and Dylan were upstairs, completely unaware that their world was about to come crashing down. And the best part? They had no idea I wasn't the only surprise waiting for them. As I walked through the hotel lobby, I kept my head low, blending into the flow of people checking in and out. My mind was sharp, calculating. I knew Amanda was upstairs, and I knew Dylan wasn't far behind her. What I didn't expect was to spot someone waiting near the elevators. Someone who looked just as determined as I felt. It was Clara. She was hard to miss, standing tall in a sleek black coat, her arms crossed and her jaw set in a way that screamed she was done playing games. She looked up, her eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, neither of us said anything. "Lucas?" she asked, her voice sharp but curious. I nodded. "Clara." We stepped to the side, out of the way of the lobby traffic. Her expression was unreadable, but there was fire in her eyes. "Dylan's here," she said, her voice low. "I saw his car in the parking lot." "So is she, isn't she?" I nodded again. "They're upstairs." She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "Unbelievable. That bastard didn't even bother to hide it." Clara looked me over, as if assessing whether we were on the same page. Then she spoke again, her tone firm. "I want to confront him. Right here, right now. He deserves to know he can't get away with this." I raised a hand, stopping her. "You could do that. But if you really want to make this count, you'll want to take a different approach." Her eyebrows lifted. "What do you mean?" I leaned in slightly, keeping my voice quiet. "If you just march up there and call him out, he'll deny everything. He'll twist the story, make excuses, try to turn it back on you. But if we work together, we can catch him in his own trap. No way out."
No excuses.
Clara tilted her head, considering my words. "All right," she said slowly. "What's the plan?" "Follow me," I said. We stepped into the elevator, the tension palpable as we rode up to the 4th floor. Clara broke the silence first. "If I tell him I know everything, it'll destroy him," she said, her voice hard with anger. "But you want to make this more interesting, don't you?" I smirked. "That's the idea. Let's make sure he falls into his own trap. Clara smiled back, and for the first time, it felt like we weren't just two strangers caught in the same mess. We were allies now, both of us determined to make Amanda and Dylan face the truth. As the elevator doors slid open, I glanced at Clara. Ready? She nodded. Let's do this. And with that, we stepped into the hallway, walking side by side toward the room where it would all go down. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was strategy. Clara and I stood outside room 407, just a few feet from the door. I could hear muffled voices and occasional laughter coming from inside. Amanda and Dylan, completely unaware of what was about to happen, were probably settling into their usual routine. Clara glanced at me, her eyes sharp. Ready? She whispered. I nodded, my hand tightening around the spare key the hotel manager had given me. More than ready. With one smooth motion, I slid the key into the lock and pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit, the heavy scent of Amanda's perfume hanging in the air. Amanda and Dylan were sitting on the bed, their heads snapping up the moment the door opened. Amanda's face went pale, her eyes wide with shock. Lucas? She stammered, scrambling to stand up. Dylan, on the other hand, looked more confused than anything else. He glanced between me and Clara, his expression shifting from surprise to a kind of smug defiance. Who the hell are you? Dylan asked, his voice laced with arrogance. I stepped into the room, shutting the door behind me. Clara followed, standing tall and composed beside me. I let the silence linger for a moment, savoring the tension in the air. Hope you're comfortable, I said finally, my voice calm but cutting. This show is just for you two. Amanda's mouth opened and closed like she was trying to speak, but no words came out. Dylan stood up, trying to put on an air of authority. What is this? He demanded. You can't just barge in here. Clara cut him off, her voice cold and sharp. Oh, shut up, Dylan. You're not in charge here. Dylan froze, his smugness faltering. Clara? He said, his tone shifting to something almost pleading. What are you doing here? She crossed her arms, glaring at him. What am I doing here? What am I doing here, Dylan? Maybe you should ask yourself that question. Or better yet, ask Amanda. Amanda flinched at her name, her face crumbling under the weight of what was happening. Lucas, please, she started, her voice trembling. I can explain. Explain, I said, cutting her off. You want to explain? Go ahead, Amanda. Tell me how sneaking around behind my back with this guy fits into your explanation. She fell silent, tears already welling in her eyes. Dylan, meanwhile, tried to step forward, putting on his best damage control face. Look, man, he started, raising his hands like he was some kind of victim. This doesn't have to get ugly. I let out a sharp laugh, cutting him off. Ugly? Dylan, this isn't ugly yet. But don't worry, we're just getting started. Clara pulled out her phone, holding it up so both Amanda and Dylan could see. Smile for the camera, she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. You're both on film. Everything you've been doing, every lie you've told, it's all here. Dylan's face turned red, his arrogance crumbling. Amanda broke into full-on sobs, covering her face with her hands. You think you've been clever, sneaking around, lying to everyone? I said, my voice steady and unrelenting. But here's the thing. You've been so busy looking out for yourselves that you didn't even see this coming. I gestured to the shattered wedding photo on the nightstand. Recognize that, Amanda? That's what's left of us. That's what you've been throwing away, piece by piece. Neither of them spoke. They just stood there, caught in the web of their own lies. And this was just the warm-up. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, and watched Amanda try to form words, her lips trembling. She looked like a cornered animal, her eyes darting from me to Dylan, then to Clara. The silence stretched, the weight of it pressing down on all of us. You look surprised, Amanda, I said finally, my voice calm but cold. Did you really think you could keep this from me forever? Lucas, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I can explain. No. I cut her off sharply, pulling out my phone. You don't get to explain. I've got all the explaining I need right here. I tapped the screen, opening a gallery of screenshots, texts, photos, timestamps of hotel check-ins. Every bit of evidence meticulously compiled. I held the phone up, flipping through each damning piece of proof. This is you, telling Dylan I don't have a clue. This is Dylan calling you his queen. And here, this is the reservation for the suite you two have been sneaking off to. Recognize it. Amanda's face crumpled as she stared at the screen. Her knees buckled slightly, and she sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands covering her face. I didn't want to betray you, she sobbed, her voice cracking. I was just looking for something new. Something new. The sheer audacity of those words hung in the air like a slap to the face. I felt my jaw tighten, but I forced myself to stay composed. Her tears might have worked on me once, but not now. I gave you everything, Amanda, I said, my voice low and steady. And this is how you repay me? By sneaking around, lying to my face, and throwing it all away for, what? Some cheap thrill with this guy. She shook her head, sobbing harder. Lucas, save it, I said, cutting her off again. You wanted something new? Well, congratulations. You've got it, but you won't like how this ends. I stepped back, letting her drown in her guilt. This wasn't over. While Amanda sat there falling apart, Clara turned her attention to Dylan. If Amanda looked broken, Dylan looked furious, though not at himself. His anger was directed at the situation, at me, and especially at Clara. What the hell are you even doing here? Dylan snapped at her, his voice rising. This has nothing to do with you. Oh, it has everything to do with me. Clara shot back, her voice like steel. You think I didn't notice your lies? The late nights, the excuses, the way you'd disappear for hours on end? I didn't want to believe it at first, but Lucas? He helped me see everything. Dylan's face flushed, his mask of confidence cracking. Clara, it's not what you think. Oh, shut up, she spat, stepping closer to him. I know about all of them, Dylan. Not just Amanda. All the others too. Did you really think you could keep this up forever? Dylan's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at me, then at Clara, then back at Amanda, who was still crying quietly on the bed. For once, he had no clever lines, no excuses. You lost everything because of your greed, Clara said, her voice slicing through the silence like a knife. And you deserve every bit of it. I stood back, watching the scene unfold, silently capturing every moment on the hidden camera I'd set up earlier. Their reactions, their broken expressions, it was all being recorded. They thought this was the end of the nightmare. But I wasn't done yet. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and walked to the door. You know, I said, glancing over my shoulder at Amanda and Dylan. This would have been a lot easier if you two had been a little more careful. But then again, if you were careful, we wouldn't have gotten to this moment. Amanda looked up, confused, her tear-streaked face a mess. What are you talking about? Instead of answering, I opened the door. One by one, familiar faces started filing into the room. Amanda's sister, her best friend, her coworker from the office she'd been lying about working late at. Amanda froze, her face going pale as she realized who they were. These, I said, gesturing to the group now standing in the room, are the people you've been lying to so skillfully. Your family, your friends. The ones you've been pretending to care about while sneaking off behind their backs. Her sister looked horrified. Amanda, is this true? Amanda's voice cracked, and she shook her head desperately. I didn't mean for it to. Her best friend cut her off. You didn't mean for what to happen? To cheat on Lucas? To destroy your marriage? Dylan, realizing he was now in a room full of witnesses, tried to slink toward the door. Clara caught him by the arm. Oh no, you don't, she said, her grip firm. You don't get to run away from this. Dylan stammered something unintelligible, but nobody was listening anymore. The room was heavy with shock, betrayal, and disbelief. Amanda sat trembling on the bed, her face a picture of shame. Dylan stood frozen, his arrogance replaced by humiliation. And me? I stood tall, ready to deliver the finale they'd never forget. The room was silent except for Amanda's quiet sobs. Her friends and family stood in stunned disbelief, their eyes bouncing between her and Dylan, processing the mess unraveling before them. I took a slow step forward, pulling a slim manila envelope from my pocket. "This," I said, holding it up for everyone to see, "is all that's left of our marriage." Amanda's head shot up, her tear-streaked face pale. "Lucas," she whispered, her voice trembling. I ignored her, walking straight to the bed and dropping the envelope in front of her. "Inside, you'll find the divorce papers. I've already signed them. All that's left is for you to do the same." Her hands hovered over the envelope, shaking. "No," she whimpered. "Please, Lucas, we can fix this. I made a mistake." I stepped back, crossing my arms. "A mistake?"
No, Amanda.
"Forgetting to pick up milk is a mistake. This was a choice. Over and over again, you chose this. Now you get to live with it." Before she could say anything else, I turned to Dylan, who was frozen in place, his face a mixture of anger and embarrassment. Reaching into my jacket pocket, I pulled out a printed invoice and handed it to him. "And for you," I said with a smirk, "the bill for the room and tonight's entertainment. Consider it a souvenir." He snatched the paper, his hands trembling with barely contained rage. "You're out of your damn mind," he growled. "Maybe," I said, leaning in slightly, "but at least I'm honest about it." Amanda dropped to her knees, clutching the divorce papers as she sobbed uncontrollably. "Lucas, please, don't do this. I'll change, I swear. Just give me another chance." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I'd said everything that needed to be said. As I turned toward the door, I glanced back at Clara, who was staring Dylan down with cold fury. We exchanged a brief nod before I walked out of the room. Behind me, Amanda's cries echoed down the hallway, but I didn't look back. The fallout was swift and brutal. The divorce went through faster than I expected, thanks to the overwhelming evidence I had. I kept the house, most of the assets, and my dignity. Once everything was finalized, I threw myself into rebuilding my life, fitness, hobbies, reconnecting with old friends. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. I even started dating again, but this time I kept my eyes open. Trust was something I wasn't going to give easily anymore, and that was okay. Amanda's life fell apart. Once her friends and family found out the full extent of her lies, they started pulling away. She lost her job, her social circle, and, from what I heard, a lot of self-respect. Every so often, I get a message from her. Long, rambling texts begging for forgiveness, asking for a second chance. I never replied. Dylan, unsurprisingly, didn't fare much better. Clara cut all ties with him, blocking his number and moving out of the apartment they shared. He tried to win her back, but Clara wasn't having it. Last I heard, Dylan was still trying to juggle multiple women, but his reputation had caught up with him. The guy was a joke now, a cautionary tale for anyone who crossed paths with him. As I sit here now, telling this story, I can't help but think about how everything unfolded. Amanda and Dylan thought they were playing me, like I was some clueless idiot who'd never catch on. But what they didn't realize was that I was the one writing the rules. Betrayal is a funny thing. It doesn't just break you, it sharpens you. It shows you who you really are and who you never want to be again. In the end, I didn't just expose the lies. I freed myself from them. And now I know one simple truth. True freedom begins where the lies end.